was on tour with a play called Outside Edge, which Ray Cooney had directed, a sort of farce, which was allegedly going into the West End. So I wasn't available actually to do this Inspector Morse thing, but I went along to meet them anyway. It was a pal of mine casting it, and went and read for Kenny McBain, had a chat, and John Thaw was sitting there, and I didn't know John really at all, or particularly his work, because I'd been out in rep playing every night, so I didn't get a chance to see the Sweeney. And he sat there with these gimlet blue eyes, sort of sizing me up for an hour, and we talked a bit about, particularly about theatre. John was very keen on theatre and the dynamics of this show that I was doing. And I explained why I thought it probably wasn't quite working and wouldn't move into the West End. And luckily for me, it bombed, or it didn't bomb, but it didn't come into London. And they'd kept the part open for me in Morse.
Lewis?
You wanted to see me, sir?
Oh, right, yes. I expect you've heard your boss is getting promoted.
Yes, sir.
Good, eh?
Oh, yes, sir. Marvellous.
I'm a quite different kettle of fish, Lewis.
I think it was the same for all of us. We were in the dark a little bit. Ted Childs was taking a big risk with this 2-hour format. McBain was the great champion of Collins' books, and luckily for us, it worked.
That's it, Lewis. You've done it. Done what?
To come on a film set with somebody as experienced as John and as technically aware about everything as John was a real complete education for me. I just learned everything I know from John, really.
You know, the world is full of such possibilities. Where are we going? Back to your mundane world. People called Grimshaw, life without art or imagination.
I was aware that we were having to build up a relationship, but he was doing really the hard work. He had all the acting to do. And I just stood for the most part and marvelled, particularly the scene at the end of The Dead of Jericho when he's summing up and all the other characters are standing around. And he had this massive speech, 2 or 3 pages, full of names and plot, and he could just do things like that in one take, John.
Throughout the Morse series, Lewis was not a handicap to the investigation at all. Very often he put Morse onto the right track. Lewis lived in the real world. He had a family, and he was completely grounded, and to a certain extent the police work was just his job. For Morse, it was everything, and he just lives in this musical world. It's his main hobby. The beer drink, the real ale, and the music are the only other things in his life. Dead of Jericho was the first film, and it was a scorching hot month that we filmed it in, and we were down in Jericho for about a week, and then mostly down the Thames Valley. I was most keen that Patrick Troughton was in. I thought he was one of my childhood heroes. He did all the kids' series on Sunday tea time when I was a kid on the BBC, and he had a part in it. And then mostly starting to work with John, who was he was always hugely generous to me, John. A lot of people found him quite frightening to work with because he had a very fierce concentration, but he insisted from day one that he and I share a caravan, which is what he'd done with Dennis Waterman on the Sweeney, and they had a great relationship, very, very good chemistry there, and John just thought it would help with the chemistry, which of course it did. Over the 14 years, we got to know each other very well, and it developed a shorthand very, very quickly, and we could talk about the script or the scenes we were doing in that van and just thrash it out before we even got on set and knew exactly really what we wanted to do with it. My favourite, and it probably isn't anybody else's favourite, is Deceived by Flight, which was in year 3 of the Morse films. And Colin Dexter had said to me the year before, "You got any ambitions? Did you ever have any ambitions in life apart from acting?" I said, "I always wanted to play cricket for England." And he said, "I'll write you it." And by this stage, we'd run out of Morse books to film, but Colin was still producing ideas and devious plot twists and things for the writers to adapt. And Anthony Minghella adapted it, and they set it around a cricket team of
dodgy smugglers, and Lewis had to go undercover, join the team to try and work out what was going on, and there's a big cricket match in the middle, which was great fun, but unfortunately the conversation hadn't gone on to say that I wanted to be an England batsman, so they'd made me a bowler. So I spent the week up at Mill Hill School bowling furiously and not very well.
In the film, John was talking to a lady friend next to him in a deck chair. I think he was, or else he'd fallen asleep because cricket was not his interest. But I know that Kevin enjoyed that because for one whole episode, he was really taking a very big part in something he loved, cricket.
The guy playing the umpire was, because he didn't have lines, was a crowd artist called David Adams, who'd been in a lot of the Morse films in various guises as a pathologist or a walk-on policeman or what have you. And because I was bowling at his end, we got chatting and became good pals over that week. And he also worked as a stand-in and said, did I have a stand-in? And I didn't. And he's been my stand-in since then, 1988, I think that was, right up to the present day. We're good buddies. They're really important stand-ins because they stand out in the cold or the hot or under the lights while they're lining up shots, which give you the chance to learn your lines or relax or whatever it is. But they're also your eyes and ears on the set. So if you're a lead actor, sometimes you need somebody to tell you when things are going wrong or if somebody's moaning about something so that you can put it right. And also it's a friendly face on every set. If you have your stand in there, you know you've got a pal to moan at yourself or to help you with whatever. So it's really well worth having. It's something that you don't see so much nowadays. It's more the older thing, but John always had a good stand in, Barry Summerford, and they're worth their weight in gold.
Is that Radio 3 now?
Supposed to be, yes.
I don't suppose you know what the England cricket score is, do you?
No, I don't.
Wondered.
Morse.
While I was enjoying the episode, unfortunately, Sheila had just been diagnosed with breast cancer, Sheila Hancock, and had moved out. So John was depressed throughout. It was his most miserable time, I think, on Morse, as he didn't enjoy it at all. And spent a lot of the time working out how he could get back together with Sheila, and it was a bit depressing for him altogether.
He rang me, you know. Yesterday, it was him who rang when we were interviewing those. It was him.
All right. Yeah, it didn't click.
The message was he knew what he wanted to tell me.
To tell you about what?
I don't know, Lewis, I don't know. Dead men can't speak, can they?
I don't know that I could give him much support in that situation, but John was always happiest at work. He loved working, and he never minded being on set for 14 hours a day or whatever. It was his favourite. It was definitely his hobby as well as his work, and he probably found solace by throwing himself into the work. Sometimes I find scripts can collapse in the middle and then build to an end. And most of the Morses were really excellent. I remember getting Al McCullen's script for Death of the Self, and I had no idea what was going on. And we read it again, John and I, and we thought, well, that didn't quite hold water. And Alma had written a very good one, the Infernal Serpent, the year before, but we couldn't get this at all because we'd had success as well with the Australian Morse, Promised Land. They thought it'd be a good idea to go abroad again, and this time Morse was really in his element in Verona amongst opera stars, and the music and the wine and everything about it was right up Morse's Strasse. And Lewis really didn't want to be there. He wanted to be at home seeing his kids' sports day.
How much longer is this likely to go on, sir? It's just I could do with getting the flight home Monday morning.
Any particular reason?
My lad's sports day. He's got me down for the father's race. I've missed it the last 2 years, and I promised him this time.
Did you think I'd be unsympathetic?
The basic fault for me was that there wasn't a murder, as it turns out. They were investigating what turns out to be an accident. And also that the characters are never in any danger. Morse gets involved personally purely because he dislikes the main protagonist, Michael Kitchen's character, from a past encounter with him, and because he's very keen on the opera. And quickly falls in love with Francis Barber's character.
So what do we do now?
I wish you good luck.
I usually get a kiss when people wish me luck. The first time I saw you, you were kissing Maureen.
Under protest.
Other than that, I didn't think there was enough in the storyline to sustain it. Of course, it looked beautiful, and Colin Gregg shot it beautifully, and like Oxford, Verona, and Vicenza looked absolutely magnificent on screen. But I'm not sure about the plot to this day. There were other problems. It was hugely hot. We were trying to film in the Arena di Verona while there were crowds of literally 5,000 or 6,000 people watching the opera. So Grace Bunbury was over there doing Turandot and getting booed off nightly, which was extraordinary. It's like a gladiatorial pit, the Verona Opera House. If they don't like you, the Italians boo you off. And this great American singer came over, and I went to see her, and they just booed that night. It was horrible to watch. But we attempted to film some of the, particularly Morse and Lewis, sitting in the audience at the end with the full crowd in, which was not easy, and the place was full of tourists anyway. I had to learn to lambada with an American actress, which was an experience for me, particularly in the heat. I couldn't do a lambada now to save my life, but I think I did it all right then. For all, I think that the plot's odd, and I'm calling it the most bizarre of the Morse films. I think it's very watchable for several reasons, not least because it's absolutely beautiful scenery and beautifully shot. There are far too many characters. I mean, again, outrageous characters in the self-organisation that Michael Kitchen runs.
They said I was in it anyway, that I was committed.
Now you, Clark.
Must be terrible to live with your level of distrust, Morse.
You know what I think? I think it's sexual inadequacy, isn't it? You don't get a lot of success with women, do you?
And Morse's friction with the local Italian police is fascinating as well. And there's plenty of Morse Lewis fun to be had. For me, the most humorous episode, for a lot of reasons, was Masonic Mysteries, which was written by Julian Mitchell. And again, it was the last episode of the fifth year. And it was Julian at his most mischievous. He's great, Julian, at working the musical themes in. And because he was on the board of Welsh National Opera at the time, he wrote this scene set during an amateur production of The Magic Flute, and a lot of the plot was very similar to The Magic Flute. And it was another of those scripts that just turned Morse head over heels. He came up against this wonderful arch enemy played by Ian McDermott, and it has more humour than most of the other scripts, but it was a very funny one to make as well for a lot of reasons. Most of the directors for the first few years had come from the British film industry, so they tended to be a slightly older generation, and Danny Boyle came in to direct Masonic Mysteries, and he was very much a younger generation and a breath of fresh air for us in a way. He'd been at the Royal Court for a long time, so he was a theatre director and great with actors, and he just had this wonderful original vision as well that he brought to Masonic Mysteries, and shot it in a very needed shooting in an odd way, because the whole thing was like a bad trip, somehow a bad dream.
Morse? Oh, you don't really think... I thought that was some kind of joke. I mean, Morse.
Because they were 2-hour films, which were very unusual on TV at that time, and the British film industry was in abeyance. I mean, it was dead in the water for many years, and periodically during the time we were making these films. So these were as good a place as any for some directors to get their teeth into a 2-hour story, maybe for the first time.
Sir Astro dead. Then who is Monostatos? Good and evil. That's what we're dealing with here.
One of the characters in it, the bizarre character, many bizarre characters, is a character called McNutt, who's been Morse's mentor as a youth. And Ian Cuthbertson came in to play the part, who was one of those great old Scottish actor managers, great theatrical actor, vast man, and a very fine screen actor as well.
Someone who didn't like Mrs. Newsom is much the more likely person to ever killed her.
But Ian had just had a heart attack not long before. He played the Scunner Campbell in Supergran years ago, and my kids used to love, and Prosecutor Fiscal. He had a lot of TV and film experience. But because of this stroke or heart attack, his memory had gone completely. And he told them up front, look, I can't learn words, I can't learn the words. So we spent days when he was on set, or 2 or 3 days, holding these big idiot cards for him. Even when you were doing your take, you had to hold an idiot card for him to put his lines back in. And a one night shoot outside his house where we were all crouched in bushes with little torches holding the light, and we just wet ourselves laughing all evening. Ian, took it all in his stride because it didn't embarrass him anymore.
Perhaps this gentleman would like to contribute to your night's lodgings.
Sir, thank you. God bless you, sir.
Here, buy yourself a drink.
Morse, please.
Thank you, sir.
In you get.
We had great fun on that. And around that time, I think John had just been created a CBE in the New Year's Honours as well. And every day at some point he would say, well, I can't say this shit, I'm a commander of the British Empire. There were always running gags like that going through the shoots. Obviously, we were really spoiled with our locations on the Morse films. The whole of Oxford's incredibly picturesque. And we'd had 5 years, 20 films we'd done set in this sort of world within a world, the strange academic, claustrophobic world of Oxford. And somebody came up with the idea of doing one abroad. Julian Mitchell came up with this wonderful script called Promised Land, in which Morse's entire world was turned on his head. And by going to Australia, you took away all his life support systems, the real ale, the jag, the music, everything about it. Nothing like Oxford at all. So I thought it was a terrific script, and John did. In the end, he came round to it, and obviously we could use Sydney Opera House and things like that, which tied in well. But it was also a really good script because it was the first time that you'd seen Morse as unsure of himself. He'd got the wrong man, as it turned out in Australia. He'd convicted the wrong man, which had never happened before, and that destroyed his confidence.
I've always prided myself. I've never sent anyone to prison who didn't belong there.
You blame yourself too much, you know that. Because Lewis was so at home in Australia and loved the life out there, Morse became that much more dependent on Lewis, really. And John Madden made this wonderful Wild West ending type movie out there that worked particularly well, I thought.
They don't spell Australian beer with 4 X's out of ignorance. They mean what they say. And light beer is an invention of the Prince of Darkness.
I liked Australia particularly for that reason, that Lewis was so relaxed and unbuttoned. You know, he took his suits off and went to the pub and quite liked Australian beer. It was a complete reverse for Lewis as well. But suddenly having those great open vistas, which John Madden filmed beautifully, and we actually had an Australian cameraman because the light's so bright out there, you really need a local to show us how to do it. Very incredibly hot, 42 degrees every day, and out in quite exposed places. We're in a place called Carra, behind the Blue Mountains, which is just like a Wild West town. I mean, it wooden, dusty streets, you know, with just immaculate, I thought, location altogether. And I like the way as well that Barry Phelan had invented some different music for out there, the country music, which Morse particularly hated on the car radio. And again, Lewis quite enjoyed.
It's the worst sort of bastardized, phony folk music. It's not Scots, it's not Irish, it's not even American. It's Australian. It's good.
it was great for me. I brought the family out there. We finished, again, it was the last one of that particular year, year 5. So it was in the run-up to Christmas by this time, and we stayed out there. John Madden had a young family, and David Lassel's a producer as well. And we all hired a big house up north of Sydney and had Christmas on the beach. So it was a real picnic. It was a great trip for me as well. John came straight home. He'd had enough.
It's an hour till the matinee. What are you going to do?
Thought I'd take a ferry, have a look around the harbour. It's one of the sights, isn't it?
Morse very much has this Alpha Plus brain. He's very proud of his mental capacities in a way that Oxbridge academics are, you know. Morse could take these flights of fancy, these extraordinary, and often went far too far, and Lewis could keep him grounded. Lewis had to do the donkey work, so he was more into the police work than Morse. From year 1, because of John's reputation in the Sweeney Inn, because it was 2-hour films and decent budget and great production values, actors were falling over themselves to get in it, so that actually anybody we asked for really would turn up, which was great, a big thrill for us. And so that in almost every film, really, from day 1, there was someone that I really looked for. It was Patrick Troughton in the first one, Sir Michael Horn very early on, who I loved watching on stage. A lot of Oscar winners or people who subsequently won Oscars, John Gielgud, Rachel Weisz, Jim Broadbent, Tom Wilkinson, Freddie Jones. I mean, just a huge list of people I admired. Fabia Drake, who was in an early one, wonderful old actress. Frankie Barber, Michael Kitchen, really top-class British actors.
Perhaps, who knows, places of learning even.
Why not Wembley Stadium?
Good evening, Chief Inspector.
Because of the nature of Morse, on the whole, Morse was the lead character, and the job of most of the guests was either to be a red herring or a murderer or what have you. But for the most part, as a result, it was they were fairly cameo roles. People like Bob Stevens, they'd maybe do 5 or 6 days shooting on it, so it wasn't a big role with an arc. Often the murderer had to have a good through storyline, but some of the others just disappeared without trace, and they came in for a few days for fun and for a nice little fee. My favourite of the lot was Ken Colley in Second Time Around. He had a big, meaty character, which he played with fantastic authority and dignity and poignance in the end. By the end, he was quite a tragic character, and he played it beautifully and kept the secret, so the audience had no idea until the last minute that actually, although he was a cop, he was involved in the original murder, and that, I think, was the finest of all the performances, even from more well-known actors, maybe.
You must let me talk to him, Morse. I know him better than anyone.
You can't, sir. You saw him just then. He's a bloody madman.
Lewis. Lay a finger on him and I'll finish you.
Playing opposite John, as anybody who worked with him will tell you, was great because he was a completely unselfish actor. He didn't have to have it all. And so you got your chances. And he played them like you play table tennis. He banged it back at you and you banged it back at him. And it made it exciting to do. You didn't have fixed positions. And that, for me, is the best. When it's unpredictable between actors.
Because we'd been playing it for years, John and I, we were settled in our characters, and John had huge natural authority anyway, particularly in his voice. He had the most magnificent magisterial voice, and it would make it quite difficult and daunting for actors to come in and play opposite him. And he also had a fearsome glower. If you were playing a suspect, he would really give you the high megawatt burn with the eyes, and Ken Colley came in and had to have as much authority as
Morse. They were old sparring partners. They'd come up through the police force together.
With all due respect, sir, everything he says can apply to Redpath. Good God, man, you had him in for the Lapsley killing.
Frederick Redpath did not kill Mary Lapsley.
And he did that absolutely effortlessly. He matched John in the arguments, and it's not an easy thing to do without rehearsal. John, as I say, was a shy man, and it took about a year or two to get to know him well, but he was great company, and I always felt very at ease with him, and I think the chemistry worked fine. From the character's point of view, it was important that the chemistry was there, and that the bond kept developing, and that there was a new angle on it constantly, so that by the end of the first 3 films, I think Lewis saved Morse's life in service of all the dead up on the roof. And at different times it swings. By the end of Way Through the Woods, Morse is saving Lewis's life. In Australia, he's very dependent on Lewis and starts calling him Robbie because he's so homesick.
I'm old and unmarried and don't understand human nature. What does it matter?
How old are you?
I forget, Robbie.
I could come with you.
Thanks, but I'm the one he wants.
It was like a marriage in many ways. They were very much an odd couple, and Lewis had to watch Morse's back and clean up for some of his mistakes. So it was a hugely important bond. In Harry Field, by the time of Who Killed Harry Field, Lewis is feeling that he ought to move on and he should have been promoted by now, and he's learning his pace, the police regulations book to take his inspector's exams. And Morse, of course, because he doesn't want to lose him, is not at all encouraging and quite disparaging about him throughout.
You got it wrong. You're about to get it wrong again.
I got it right. That's what you can't stomach.
There's a beautiful scene in it, written by my pal Jeff Case, where Lewis asks him at the pub if he thinks he could be an inspector, and Morse says, "I'm sorry to have to tell you, Lewis, that I think you probably could." And it's really nicely written from that point of view. But that's the tension in the film Harry Field, whether Lewis is going to move on and leave Morse in the lurch again. Do you think I'm good enough to be recommended for promotion?
I'm sorry to tell you, Lewis, that the answer to that is yes.
Different films as well. You see Lewis working with other policemen, Alan Armstrong in Happy Families, and in The Way Through the Woods, I think that Johnson, the other detective, and you see him working with them, and they're not nearly as inspired as Morse, and you can see him just not enjoying it at all.
Let me fill up and I'll bounce you off the walls, son. Boy thinks he's a comedian, Bob.
Can I have a word, sir? A word, please, now.
I think Lewis has extraordinary respect for Morse throughout, really, from the word go through at the end, and that's partly why he doesn't move on. He loves working with him, and he recognises that Morse is a special brain and a special detective.
It's not Scots, it's not Irish, it's not even American. It's Australian. It's good.
People used to say, don't you get sick of Morse doing you down and belittling you? And actually, I was always aware that Morse thought very highly of Lewis as well, and he actually says so eventually in one or two of the later films. But it's obvious in John's performance as well how reliant he is on Lewis. So maybe Lewis is reluctant to move on because he enjoys working with him, and possibly realises that he's never going to be in his class as a detective. You tend to, with TV dramas, not on the whole, to have a lot of blood and gore flying around because of watersheds and what have you. But we had a few really dramatic moments. The most obvious, I guess, is the end of the Promised Land, the potential shootout in the street, and Morse on the roof at the end of Service of All the Dead, with a guy trying to push him off. And in Greeks Bearing Gifts, a baby's held out over the banisters in thin air, which caused such a furore that Roy Jenkins, I think, asked questions about it in the House of Lords if there was any protection for. We had this very sunny, smiley baby all day who was held out. His mum was right by him all day, but Jan had to hold him over the banister, and she shouted during the take, and it shocked the baby. So the only time during the day it cried, and questions were asked in the house about that. But I think possibly the most dramatic for me is the way through the woods, because of the suddenness and ferocity of the finale, and because there's an argument between Morse and Lewis that we'd had little spats before, but this is the most ferocious of our arguments.
So you don't think he went out to the garage that evening? Is that what you said?
He filled up in the morning. There was no need to go out again in the evening.
So why do you think he went?
I think he went to Whiteham Woods.
White? God's sake, man!
She's still out there, Lewis. We found Myton, but not the girl.
There's no one out there but Mr. and Mrs. Michaels, and why the hell should Daly want to see them?
Mostly scenes were put together on the floor during camera rehearsals. You didn't. John and I talked about scenes in the caravan, and very occasionally we'd read through it, or he'd say, "Can you read it through?" Just so we get, if it was very wordy, it would help us learn the lines. But mostly things were rehearsed with the director when you saw how the director wanted to shoot it or what angle he wanted to get on it. Occasionally, if you had a big row like that, yeah, you anticipated a bit more. Maybe the weekend before you did it, you started looking at it as opposed to learning it the night before.
Maybe he could be sure about his wife, but not the son, and that's why he kept him at home. But he maltreats him. The lad winds up in an institution, a place where Mitchell can't control him, a place where he might say anything. So then Mitchell sends this diary to the police, hoping to make us believe the killer's dead or dying.
Both John and I, John did it more than me, I think, sat at home and orchestrate the lines, so we find a tune in our head that we want for each line, and so we know exactly how we want to say it and what meaning we want to get into it, and you have a rough idea in your head of how you want to play it. But if you get anything too fixed in your mind, the director will muck you up the next day by shooting it from a completely different angle, and it'll throw you.
Good God. You're jealous, aren't you? You can't stand the idea of Dawson being right. He's proved his point about the diary and you can't stomach it.
Take your leave, Sergeant.
No, sir, I'm not taking any leave.
The Way Through the Woods was the first of the specials film, what we called the one-offs. It had been written by Colin Dexter, the book, after we'd finished making the Morse film, so we came back to do this as a special. And because I'd by then gone on to peak practice and was headlining my own show there, that they wrote Lewis a little bit more to do, so there's a wonderful big fight between Morse and Lewis.
This was never about Johnson. This is about you and me.
You and me?
Yes! I proved myself a decent detective, but you're such a bloody arrogant, self-centered bastard. You'd rather die than ever admit it.
It's a lovely, meaty scene, that, and the huge finale that's quite unusual for a Morse as well, the kind of bloody Greek finale. I think 4 or 5 of the films were quite difficult to film for different reasons. Some extraneous, like the heat in Australia and the brightness of the light, and the heat in Italy, and various other scenes trying to film in the streets in films. But the most difficult for me, undoubtedly, was The Remorseful Day, mostly because of the expectation. This was very obviously the last Morse. The papers had said 3 or 4 times, "Oh, this is the last ever Morse." But obviously, because of Morse dying in the story, this was the end of it. So expectations were huge for it, and as a result, we were quite worried about how it would go and how to shoot it. Another reason was that because Morse had to be unwell throughout and get progressively more unwell, and John was playing unwell, he wasn't enjoying it much because he couldn't use it. He had a most wonderful voice, John, very powerful, resonant voice, which he used to great effect in the Morse character.
Isn't it your round?
Do you think another one's a good idea?
Think. That's why I want it, to think. I don't drink for pleasure.
You're all right, aren't you, sir?
John's cancer wasn't diagnosed for almost another year. His voice became more and more difficult, I think, for him, but that was definitely the beginning of it. He told me later it was definitely then that it was starting to develop. I think John and I both thought that it was time it ended. I hadn't done the one before because I thought we were coming to the end of the films, and it was time to stop. And I know John thought the same thing, but with this, because it was forced on us, because in the story he died, Colin had decided to kill him off as well. He didn't want to write any more books. So because it was a fait accompli, we didn't feel down about it. As I recall, we all quite enjoyed the actual experience of shooting. The crew were on a high, and everybody was building towards the death scene. But it was the expectation really that made it difficult, and having to do things slightly out of character for both of us. Lewis's grief at the end, and for such a bouncy, ebullient character, and Morse because of his illness, it made it difficult to shoot from that point of view.
I would go home if I was you.
Well, you're not me.
I can cope here.
It's a strange one from a lot of points of view. There were speeches when he recites the Houseman at the pub with the sun setting in the background.
Ensanguining the skies, how heavily it dies into the west away.
Very awkward to act that and get it off the page. I mean, there are not many actors that could have done that. I think that was brilliant the way John did that. And then the grief scenes at the end.
Goodbye, sir.
In the script, it went on from there. He walks down the corridor and gets in his car and slumps in his car and starts grieving and thinking, and then he drives off and bursts into tears at some lights in St Giles in Oxford. And of course, when they knitted it together, you didn't need any of that, but we shot these endless grieving scenes of Lewis walking away from the body, probably 2 or 3 days worth of shooting that were never used, never needed.
Dad had to sell the silver.
Dear, dear.
You don't understand.
No.
Morse will.
Inspector Morse is dead!